All right, welcome to Endless Bullets, episode 5. My name is Matt Swafford. I'm your host. Today, we are talking about the wild geese, and I'm joined by my good friend, my old friend. God, it's almost 20 years we've known each other, by the way.
Yeah, a lot of water under the bridge.
My good friend, artist John Nadeau. John, tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find some of your work.
I'm an artist, a comic book artist, and a painter from way back. I did comics in the 90s for Dark Horse and Marvel and DC. And I'm currently working on a comic book called Vector that I'm also writing that's available at Indie Planet. Also doing paintings for the Art of Disney galleries.
Very nice. And I've seen some of these paintings out at gallery at what's it called, Disney Springs.
Yep.
And just absolutely breathtaking. I'm not a art connoisseur by any means, but I've seen John's work for a long time. I have some of his art hanging in my living room, and he is top notch. So if you're not familiar with his work, I suggest everyone stop what you're doing, stop this podcast, and go check it out. Go Google John Nadeau art.
Or maybe do it after the podcast.
or do it now and come back. I don't know. It's fine. That's the beauty of the pause button. I can't wait to jump into this one because there's so much to talk about. And normally when I take notes on a movie, it's usually like 2 pages, like 2 notebook pages. This one is almost 4. I have almost 4 pages of notes on this one.
Yeah, me too.
This is a very kind of a simple movie, but it's also very dense. For all of the gunfights and kind of things that can be glossed over, there's so much intricacy to this plot. And as far as their plans and the machinations of everybody involved, there's a lot. There was a lot to write down. I was like, holy crap. All right. So 1978, this movie came out, directed by Andrew McLaughlin. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He's really had a kind of an interesting career. He directed a lot of John Wayne movies, McClintock. He also did some stuff with Jimmy Stewart. He did Chisholm with John Wayne. He did The Undefeated. He did The Hellfighters. And he also did Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart. The Devil's Brigade with William Holden. Bandolero. The Last of the Hard Men. And a lot of TV. He did a lot of, I think, Gunsmoke. He directed the bulk of that series. The legendary Richard Burton, Shakespearean actor, very famous alcoholic.
Yeah, that's true.
And multiple Academy Award nominee, never won, and was very outspoken about that. Richard Harris, another, I'd say the Michael Jordan and the Scottie Pippen of 70s actor alcoholics.
Yeah, I guess all this was missing. All this movie was missing was like Oliver Reed and a couple others who had it.
Oh, and Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, those are the Mount Rushmore of your British hard drinking English thespians.
Absolutely. Oh, and maybe Robert Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they were great actors too. Just, I mean, fantastic actors, and just both had that affliction.
Yeah, and to the extent I think that some of these producers were nervous about them and had put in contracts that they were gonna not screw up their productions with their antics.
Oh, absolutely. And this movie was a good example of that. The producer, Ewan Lloyd, actually put up his entire salary as a guarantee against hiring Richard Harris because they wanted, I think, Burt Lancaster, because Rayford Jonders was supposed to be an American. They balked at Burt Lancaster because he wanted the role rewritten and he wanted more screen time. Mm-hmm. And they said, absolutely not. We'll get Richard Harris. He's already in Africa because he filmed a movie called The Golden Rendezvous or something like that. And apparently he caused a bunch of shit on that set and was drunk through the whole thing. And they were like, well, you got to put up a guarantee if we're going to hire this guy. Because apparently he was kind of a hellraiser. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a prime example of that happening. Rounding out the cast, the primary cast are Roger Moore. And this was in, I'd say, the prime of his James Bond years. And he'd done a few before and he did a few after, but this was right smack in the middle of him playing James Bond.
Yeah, he had just done, Moonraker, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah, 78. It was right after Star Wars. So, yeah, Moonraker. Other than the Bond stuff, he had done, around this time, he did a movie called North Sea Hijack, which is also known as Folks.
Oh, yeah.
With the same director, Andrew McLaughlin. Let's see, he did a movie called The Seawolves a few years later, which had a lot of the same cast from this movie in it.
Yeah,
And
Andrew McLaughlin again.
yeah, exactly. So it's one thing to be said for that guy as a director. He worked with a lot of the same actors repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel like that's kind of the mark of not necessarily a great director, but at least a director that actors like.
Well, I wonder if that's kind of part of his studio system training, like where he has his way of doing things, and just to do it over and over is kind of his comfort zone. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that makes total sense. And like his dad was an actor and a director as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
think he got that from his dad. His dad did a lot of work with John Ford. So you get that same thing that John Ford did, where it's like, oh, yeah, these guys were in that movie. I'm doing a new picture. Let's put them in that one, too.
Let's get the gang together again.
Exactly. And I feel like there's something to be said for that. It's kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
I feel like Hollywood doesn't really do that anymore. Hardy Kruger is the fourth build in this. Man, I could do an entire hour-and-a-half podcast on that guy's biography.
Oh, he has a fascinating history.
Yeah, I mean, just don't want to get into it now, but just a really, really interesting guy. And we just recently lost him 2 months ago.
Yep.
93 years old. I was under the impression that he was the last of the main cast of this movie that was still alive, but now they're all gone. Always seemed to play Nazis, and because he was a Nazi youth and was forced into that against his will, and was almost killed, was sentenced to death, and was almost killed by the Nazis for refusing to fight,
mm-hmm.
and ended up being let go because the commanding officer felt pity for him, and ended up living in the forest, and made his way to the free world, and just a really, really fascinating career too.
And then plays German officers and German soldiers for 35, 40 years.
Well, he had a famous quote too, where he was. This was like in the '60s or something like that, where somebody asked him how he felt about playing Nazis, and he was like, "I hate this shit. Like I had to wear this stuff when I was a kid." But he did it really well. So that's the main cast. How old were you the first time you saw this movie?
It's kind of hard to say because in a way this movie was ever present on HBO. I don't think it was a video watch for me, but I remember seeing it in pieces like multiple times just as it played in the background on HBO. Like if my dad was watching it, and it in a way it kind of probably blended into a lot of other men on a mission movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this one, and I was similar. I don't think I ever saw this on HBO, which is, it might be the first time I've ever said that because I was an HBO kid. But I remember seeing this on VHS, and my mom's boyfriend rented it. And when he brought it home, he was super excited. He was like, "Yeah, we're going to watch the Wild Geese." And as a, 6, 7-year-old kid, I was like, "What the fuck? Like I don't want to watch a movie about geese."
A
what
nature
is this, some
documentary?
Yeah, what is this, Animal Planet? I don't want to watch geese. I want to watch like guys like with Uzis in Africa shooting other bad guys. As soon as I watched the movie, I was like, "Oh, holy crap! This is like an old-timey war movie." Even though it only came out a few years before, just absolutely loved it. I didn't understand all the politics, but I knew the good guys versus the bad guys, basically.
Oh yeah, same here. I mean, it was guys in soldier outfits with Uzis, and one of them had a crossbow, which was the coolest thing ever.
Oh yeah,
getting in combat.
And that was in a time when crossbows were still, as old of a weapon as that is, they were almost exotic.
Oh, very exotic.
Because when you had a crossbow, it was like right around the time that like ninja culture came out, and you look at movies around the same time, like Lone Wolf McQuade. They use a crossbow in that movie for no fucking reason, but other than it's just cool. Scarlett from G.I. Joe had a crossbow, and she's surrounded by all these guys with laser guns and bazookas and everything else.
Well, yeah, if you can take someone out with a crossbow, that's even harder than with a sniper rifle. And you've got to be twice as badass to do that.
Well, I love that there's a reason for the crossbow in this movie too, other than just, oh, we got to do it quiet, but you got to make sure that those guys are dead as soon as those bolts hit them.
Yeah. And
so they use the cyanide ampule, which a little, I mean, the realism of that, even at 100 feet, is kind of like, what if you miss?
But the 8-year-old me just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was,
absolutely.
And it was shown in such a hardcore way, as opposed to something you'd see in James Bond. This was like super just real gritty realism, at least to an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old.
Absolutely. Well, and
Yep.
it's funny that you mentioned James Bond, because there's a lot of James Bond fingerprints all over this movie. Because,
definitely.
The second unit director was John Glenn, who directed a bunch of James Bond movies, and 2 of my favorites, The Living Daylights, and he directed License to Kill.
Okay, the Dalton ones.
Yep, who is, I'm on record as saying I think Dalton was the best Bond, but again, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But he also did a bunch of the Roger Moore ones too.
Mm-hmm.
And, solid director. Let's see. So let's talk about that opening.
Well,
with
talking about James Bond, I mean, it's got the song, it's got the female singer. It really starts off kind of saying, this is kind of like a James Bond movie you're about to watch.
Well, I feel like, they were trying to ape that style, but instead of showing you silhouettes of like naked dancing girls that are shooting at you, it was like, hey, look at all this, the people of Africa, and look at how beautiful it is, but also there's plight. And
it's like Dark Epcot.
Yeah, it was. It was like Dark Epcot, and I don't know much about the singer. Her name's Joan Armatrading, but I do not care for this song. It sounds like Cher yodeling. It's like, make it last, and I don't even know what the words of the song are, but it is just a heavy-handed, kind of a faux motional, I guess. That's not a term, but I'm making it one.
Yeah, I guess it didn't move too many soundtrack albums.
I feel like it was trying to like tug at your heartstrings, but without any frame of reference. Just a very kind of an odd choice, but I feel like all of the music in this movie is really tone deaf.
As bad as the song was, I think the song is the least of this movie's problems.
It is. It's, and we'll get into that because I love this movie, but there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems, a lot of things to talk about. I love it in spite of those problems, but
yeah.
I never pretend that they aren't there. But yeah, so the opening song and the UNICEF commercial at the beginning, and then it cuts from that to the Colonel Faulkner, played by Richard Burton, landing at what I assume is Heathrow Airport in London. Our first shot of him is him sitting in the airport with a bottle of scotch in a paper bag, pouring it into a paper cup.
Yeah, and the Concorde had 2 hours of champagne service, so he already got a head start and went straight to duty free to pick up some whiskey.
Yeah, I feel like they could have had a caption underneath him that said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Burton."
Yeah.
In his natural habitat.
Yep.
Funneling a bottle of scotch, basically. A chauffeur shows up to pick him up, and he immediately derides him for being late. And he has, he kind of sets up his character as this kind of sharp, quick. Essentially, it's just Richard Burton being Richard Burton.
Right.
And he kind of sets up that he's no nonsense. And
yeah,
so
he's an intelligent guy, and he's been around, but obviously he does like to drink a lot.
He does enjoy a sip or two. So the driver takes him to his benefactor, the person that paid for him to fly there, which we find out in a few minutes, which is Mr. Matherson, who's played by Stuart Granger, another old Hollywood type. I know he was in a lot of things. I don't know a ton about him. I know he was in like a couple John Wayne movies. Kind of a big star in his day, I guess.
Yeah, he's got a long list of stuff he's been in because he was doing it since I think like the 30s. And one of the interesting things I noticed about his list of movies is that he's been in a lot of movies that have like contemporary names, but are actually the old versions of stuff, like King Solomon's Mines, but not like the one from the early 80s. It's the one from 1950, or Love Story, but not the one from the early 70s. It's the one from 1944. Same thing with Convoy and Red Dragon and Commando and I Spy. None of them the ones we know, but from like a alternate universe of really, really old movies.
Oh,
It's
that's
like he's been
interesting.
around that long.
Wow. So yeah, it's like he's got all these titles, and you see him, and you're like, oh, he was an I Spy. Oh, that was a different I Spy. Oh, he was in
From
Commando.
1934.
Oh, he was in Commando, but not the one with Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Yeah, that's weird. That's an interesting thing to have on your resume.
Mm-hmm.
So as he's introduced to Matherson, they kind of initiate this cold interaction where they both are kind of like, okay, yeah, you paid me to be here, but you kind of fucking suck. You think I suck, but I'm gonna drink your whiskey anyway. And what when he gives him that whiskey,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a kid who's just been on the tetherball court for 2 hours. You hand him a tall glass of lemonade, and he drinks it with both hands. I mean, when you double hand your whiskey, you really know you're in for a dark movie to come.
and like I said, that's Richard Burton in his natural habitat, in his most normal state.
I
Double
guess
fisting whiskey.
that was actually kind of jarring. I looked at that and I'm like, wow.
Well, I feel like it's overemphasized so that his next line hits home a little bit better. And
Mhm.
after he drains the whiskey, he says, "I'm dry when I work." So it's like to reassure him that, like, yeah, when I'm on the job, like, I'm not doing this, but when I'm not, this is all I do.
I suppose there's some professional comfort to be taken in that maybe in that community the drunks are even better when they're sober.
Well, I feel like, and he's the best in the business, assumedly, and I feel like mercenaries get a star rating the more of an alcoholic that they are.
I've been through so much bad stuff and survived so many bad battles that I'm an even bigger alcoholic than the other guy that's not as good.
So
Eh,
and it kind of works, but then he kind of alleviates the tension by saying, "There's a clause in my contract that says that my liver is to be buried separately with honors," and it's the first of many of his quips throughout this movie, and it's almost like a litmus test for whether or not you get dry humor,
mhm.
because a lot of that stuff would, I mean, as a kid, would go right over my head,
Oh
but
yeah.
now as a 44-year-old adult, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really clever actually. And he says it so deadpan. So the first thing that Matherson wants to discuss is Faulkner's previous failure in securing Limbani a few years prior. And that kind of sets them after each other conversationally, where he says, well, you know exactly what happened. You didn't pull my name out of a hat. And then they do the flashback where Limbani gets captured on the plane before he arrives so that Faulkner can receive him or whatever was going to happen.
Yeah, that's some right out in the open federal hijacking going on right there with just regular dudes. Like they're gonna get off the plane after doing this. I always thought that was kind of a weird cut to scene.
It is weird because there's no panic, there's nobody freaking out, and the guy that sits down next to him is literally like, it's like he just woke up from a nap. He's
Mhm.
like, hello, President Lombani. Nothing to worry about. We're just going to divert the plane. Just sit quietly." And it's like, just he's completely nonplussed by the whole thing.
Yeah, I think their technical advisor Hoar was probably had a very kind of lackadaisical attitude towards hijacking that probably got him in trouble later. But I think at some point they were like, "Can you really hijack a plane and steal a guy like that?" And he was like, sure."
Yeah, as long as you're cool about it. So then once they get done with the flashback, Faulkner lays out basically what they're asking him to do, which is they want him to retrieve Limbani, who is still alive. I guess the rumor has been for the past few years that he's dead, but he's actually alive and being held prisoner. Matherson wants Limbani rescued and brought to him so that he can negotiate copper rights on in some of the, it gets a little bit foggy with some of the countries here, but
Yeah,
this
there's a
is
lot of political stuff that they talk about to kind of make themselves sound hoity-toity bankerish. It's all political and copper rights, et cetera, et cetera. And the president is, we need a president who will give us the copper rights or something to that effect.
well, I feel like he's kind of an allegory for Mandela,
Uh-huh.
or a Mandela type person that has been in prison, but he's beloved. I don't even know what country was his. because he was in a country called Zambala, but I don't know if that's his country that he's trying to get back or whatever, or that they want to put him back in power. Yeah, no, like I said, it gets really foggy. I've seen this movie 30 times. It's still foggy to me.
That's probably the entire history of Africa or Central Africa, in the last half of the 20th century. Just lots of that going on in lots of different countries.
Exactly. And
run by bankers.
Yeah, wars fueled by bankers.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to rescue him before this evil general in Dofa from another country that took over his finds out where he is and has him assassinated, or something along those lines. Like, General Ndofa is the main bad guy, and we never see him, but he wants Limbani dead, and so he's going to seize the opportunity to make sure he gets him. So they have a very time-sensitive mission here.
Right, Limbani is the MacGuffin, basically.
Yes, and Faulkner ascertains this, and I feel like he's got Matheson kind of against the wall, where it's like, well, I'm the best, and you're just going to pay me whatever I want, because they even say, like, oh, no, what? That's it? No negotiations? And he's like, well, I have to see if this job's feasible. If I decide that it is, then I don't discuss fees. I just get what I want. And I think that's the most baller negotiation move I've ever seen in a movie.
Oh yeah, he's basically offering restaurant rates. You don't negotiate the price of a steak.
Yeah.
He does take everything that the banker tells him about Limbani pretty much at face value. All of the intelligence that he tells him, he's just, okay, I guess I'll have to accept it.
Yeah, he's very trusting of the intel. He finds out the two things that he needs to find out. He says, okay, I'll look into some things and I'll get back. Faulkner tells Balfour, who's Matherson's lackey, that there's two men that he has to find, and he needs intelligence on the layout of the prison where Limbani's being held. But he tells him to find Rayford Jonders, who was one of his best friends, and describes him, or he says the name, and then Balfour, this is description that Balfour gives back to him: fair head, cigarette holder, wears glasses. And he's like, that's the one. He's here in London if he's alive. So, still pretty vague, but kind of descript. And then the next guy that he wants him to find, this is the description he gives him: Sean Finn, very good looking. So he describes him by his name and very good looking. And immediately the guy's like, oh, I know who Sean Finn is. Find me this guy in London that's very good looking.
Well, that's Roger Moore's agent, hard at work, earning his pay.
Yeah, exactly. That's like his press guy jumping on the director's back, being like, hey, you have to say he's good looking. You have to.
Well, it doesn't it hurt that Roger Moore is constantly standing next to these older guys. You look better standing next to Richards, Harris, and Burton.
Yeah, that's true. I think they were either the same age, or he might have even been older at that point. He wasn't older than Burton, but I think he was older than Harris.
Oh, I think, yeah, you're right. Richard Harris, I think, was 47 when he made this, and Roger Moore was 50.
Yeah.
Although I think everybody is falling into that thing in the 50s through the 70s where they looked about 20 years older than they really were.
Oh my God. We were watching this, and when they're interviewing some of the characters to be on the team, they give Jock, one of the officers, they give him shit because he says he's 42 and he's really 47. And
he looks like 57.
But he looks like he's 67.
Yeah.
And Whitty, the doctor, is 43 years old, and he looks like he's 70.
Yeah, I almost had a heart attack watching some of that stuff.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, I'm older than that. And I look like I could be his son.
Yeah, all the crew needed was Wilford Brimley to show up at 35 years old.
So he has Balfour try to track down Sean Finn, and he finds him, Rayford Jonders. But in the meantime, from that scene, it cuts to the very good-looking Sean Finn, played by Roger Moore, arriving at a drug dealer's party where he is acting as a courier and unknowingly is running heroin for this drug dealer guy, who is the son of a American gangster operating in London.
Which also, that actor is the son of a famous American producer.
Alan Ladd, yeah.
Yep. So I guess he found his character pretty quickly. But that scene I thought was pretty hilarious.
It feels like almost like an Austin Powers thing or something where he walks in and it's like this swinging sex party.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I guess it's the kind of party that like 60-year-old producers think is what youngsters have trying to be hip. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I love that they gave him the most old English fuddy-duddy bodyguard ever.
Yeah.
Like that guy was the most unimposing bodyguard ever. And when he tells him to like break any two things on this man, like you would imagine like John Matusak or some like giant dude. And
I had
like that guy, really?
Yeah, but although I couldn't stop looking at his forehead, where either it was a not very well concealed future squib where Roger Moore was going to shoot him, or if Roger Moore just thought that bump on his forehead was so weird that's where he wanted to shoot him.
Yeah, he had like this weird dent / bump on his forehead. It looked like he'd been hit with a hammer. And later, in a minute or two later, when Roger Moore shoots him in the head because he won't eat the heroin, that's right where the bullet goes. It's like, so my vote is for Mini Squib.
Yeah, probably.
So he shows up, talks to the drug dealer guy and his bodyguard, telling him that they're moving bad heroin, that a girl died, and he doesn't run drugs, it's his religion. And they didn't tell him, and he's really pissed off about it. So he basically pulls his gun and tells them both, well, you guys are going to eat this heroin.
Eat the heroin.
Yeah. Eat this smack, or I will kill you, which, I mean, I'd rather be shot.
Yeah,
You're gonna die anyway.
I mean, I guess that's a way to kill someone, but you've just shot a guy. Now, Sonny, I think is his name, gets the entire bag to eat. So Roger's going to just sit there in the middle of in a room in the middle of a party and watch this happen. I feel like the lengths they're going to establish that he's a nice guy who objects to running heroin is being done at the expense of someone who doesn't think things through.
Yeah, well, they're trying to establish that he's got this moral compass and that he's one of the good guys. But it's like, I mean, you just murdered two guys pretty horribly.
Well, not doing much to cover it up, really, because they're all the witnesses that saw him go in there and who will watch him leave.
It sets up that he's got a price on his head.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the whole reason that it does that is so that Rafer and Alan have to go rescue him. But that doesn't really pay off because they really, other than Richard Harris punching a hole in the door and dropping a grenade, they don't have to fight their way out of that building. It's kind of a pointless thing. Like they could have just found Sean Finn and called it a day.
I wonder if someone said, it's an hour and a half before we get to the big action. Maybe we need something in the first act for people to do, a little bit of action to tide us over until things start happening for real.
Well, and it's neat that they kind of get Rafer and Alan to go and get him, because it's kind of a good, like, getting the band back together moment.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows how they're all, like, friends, and they're friends to the point where he hasn't seen him in years, but the first thing he says to him is, clown. And he's like, clown? And then he's like, yeah, whatever, idiot. And he's like, clown and idiot. Okay. So it kind of just sets up that they have that closeness that they can just kind of fuck with each other like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it sets it all up, and then it goes nowhere. I kind of want to see them fight their way out of that place.
Yeah, and then the banker's got to call off the hit and stuff like that, and it just does. It feels like a lot of unnecessary stuff that's interrupting the pace. Is this montage sequence of getting the key people together to go on the mission?
But I feel like you could cut that whole subplot, and the movie would have just been fine. Would have been totally good.
Yeah. Did we skip the scene with?
Yes, we did.
Rafer and his son.
Yes. So from the party, we cut to Faulkner going to visit Rafer at his home with his son. And he's having kind of I guess they've just finished dinner, and he's talking to his son and telling him, I'm going to take you on a big holiday for Christmas, and we're going to go skiing in Switzerland.
What every young boy at that age wants.
Like, forget Disney World, forget, anything that you would really want to do. We're going skiing in Switzerland, and we're staying in a villa, and that kid acts like like you got him tickets to Zoobly Zoo or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh boy, Daddy, I'm so happy." God, that kid. I feel like I
my
could talk
God,
about that
yeah.
kid for an hour. If he was wound any tighter, that kid's head would have popped off.
Oh boy, that is fantastic. That is literally a line that comes out of that kid's mouth.
I don't even know what to do, Daddy. Well, why don't you scream? Wahoo!
Oh yeah, why don't you scream? This is why you sometimes hire people to punch up a script.
Yeah. What do they say in Hollywood? Like, never work with kids or animals. I mean, it's hard to find kids that are great actors. So when you do, they really stand out. This kid was, I feel like he was like just chewing on his teeth until it was time for him to talk. And then he was just reading his line. Like, even when he screams Yahoo, it's kind of like the most reserved Yahoo.
Yeah, I just wonder about directing all of this. I get the feeling that McLaughlin was anxious to get Harris and Burton together, and so they wanted to. All right, let's get these scenes done and out of the way, and kid's going to be a kid, and let's not do too many takes. Let's get that over. And the kid even leaves pretty quickly once Burton shows up, and they both look kind of relieved.
It's like, thank God this kid's out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't have any kind of like real dialogue either. It's just like, "Hello, it's very nice to meet you. I hope to see you later. I hope so too. Okay, where's your fucking scotch?" And I mean, other than a little bit of pleasantries, I mean, they established it's been 10 years since they've seen each other. How's the wife? Oh, she died. How's your wife? Oh, she's 29 now and she's living in Paris. My kid's in a boarding school. I see him on the weekends. So, what can I do for you? And then he tells Rafer that he needs him for a job. Rafer says, "I'm retired. I'm not doing that. I'm unavailable." And they kind of dance around the tree with that for a little bit.
Well, also if you kind of read between the lines on some of this stuff, what Harris is telling Burton with regard to the living situation with his kid, he says something like, "I see him on the weekend. He goes to boarding school. I see him on the weekends, and that's enough." And I get the feeling that he's saying, "I really don't like having a child. It's kind of getting in the way of my life a bit." And then Burton just kind of confirms that about his own kids. He goes, "Yes, my kids are grown up and we don't talk much anymore. Basically, having kids just sucks, and there's why bother with them, really?"
Yeah,
and
he kind of says, "I think I'm a disappointment," or something like that. Or yeah, I don't think they like what I do. And it's like, well, I mean, you're a fucking killer for hire. I mean, that tracks, Faulkner.
Yeah, I think Burton knows he's going to have to kind of seduce Harris a bit into the mission, and the whole talk about kids really gets him on his wavelength a bit, brings him over to his side to be more receptive to the pitch.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a little bit of manipulation going on, and you and I talked about this, but
yeah.
I feel like I don't feel like it's as overt as what you do, but I definitely feel like he's definitely kind of gaming him, and he knows how to get to him, even though it's been 10 years since he's seen him. He kind of appeals to his idealism and has him. Okay, well, finally the answer is no. Let's not spoil our visit. And he's like, "Oh, okay, sure. Well, just do me a favor.
Look at this thing I have in my pocket.
Yeah, look at this map for me. Can you just give me an idea of how to get into this building?" And then once he gets the wheels turning, it's like he watches them too, and it's like you can almost see him salivating.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed about Burton is that if you look at his eyes, there's something feral in his eyes that it comes out mostly at the end, but it peeks out a little here, and I think that's part of this kind of feral desperation that's going on with Burton, that he needs this, he needs the money, and he needs the mission for deeper things, and he knows he needs Harris or it won't happen.
Yeah, well, he even says that in those exact words is, no Sean, no mission, no Rafer, no mission. So yeah, he's definitely got that. I think it's part of him being, that expert killer and expert mercenary, that he's being a mercenary in this exact moment, but with his best friend or with one of his best friends. And it's different, but it's that same operation. It's that same machination that, he's looking at him as prey. I mean, he's not going to kill him, but he wants him for this mission, and he's going to do whatever he has to do to get it done.
Oh, he definitely sees him as an asset. And I wouldn't be surprised if he considers him his best friend, even though he hasn't seen him for 10 years. But yeah, he's definitely working on him, in spite of having just seen this little boy who, they dismissed, but he knows that he could make that little boy into an orphan. I don't care. I still need him on the mission.
Yeah, and I feel like that's all valid, but
Mm-hmm.
with somebody like him, your heart is so hardened to that kind of stuff. Even though, basically, even if he was going to think about that, he wouldn't think about that until after it was all over.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like is kind of where they leave us at the end of the movie, and so he's kind of got to pay that check at that point. He's just trying to get the ball rolling. Here's my question: when he says, "I'm taking Emil skiing for 2 weeks before Christmas on December 13th." Faulkner repeats the date to him, December 13th. Does Faulkner at that point know that he's going to interrupt these plans? Or does he just say that incidentally, and then whenever the plan gets moved up, he's truly surprised?
I think I kind of double checked it, and because I was wondering about that, I wouldn't put, and I think there's gray area there. I wouldn't put it past him to know that it was already an early mission, and he's saying, "Oh, you have time to go on your vacation," and then Faulkner is going to get some other guy to be the bad guy and say, "Well, we moved the mission up," when Faulkner knew that it was an early mission all along. But knowing that in this scenario, if it was an early mission, then Rafer couldn't have done it, and that he's just screwing with him. Then again, it could really have been originally the mission was going to be later, and circumstances outside of their control moved it up.
I feel like it could really go either way, and I was on the fence when we talked about it last night, but then I watched it a little while ago, and the guy, Rushton, the Matherson's
like lackey number 2.
Well, yeah, I feel like he's he's his version of Rafer.
Mm-hmm.
He's his planner or whatever. He waits until he's walking out the door and turns around and is like, "Oh, yes, I almost forgot. We're actually moving this up 3 weeks." That's really important intelligence. I feel like he would say that at the beginning. And it's almost like, "Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to turn around and remind them that this is moving up 3 weeks, even though Alan already knows this." Does that make sense? I feel like that's the only thing that kind of made me like,
I think it bolsters the idea that it was circumstances outside of control that moved the schedule up, and also that it's the banker and his people just not being as professional with the schedule and stuff as they probably need to be, setting up a wedge between them and the mercenaries a bit. We're the ones in charge. You do what we say.
Yeah, it's a fascinating either or, I think, because I feel like you could really look at it either way. Faulkner meets back with Balfour, the lackey, about Finn, and he tells him about the price that's on his head and that he had killed 2 members of the mafia family in London. He basically says, "Get Matherson to lift the contract or else no deal." And then he says, "Give me his activity for the past year. Me and Rafer are going to go find him." So we've already kind of touched on this, but so they go to the casino where one of his 9 ex-girlfriends from this past year is working because Sean Finn likes to fuck.
Yeah, and also I think if you can be tracked down by people you haven't seen in years because of the number of girlfriends that everyone knows about it, the contract is going to get you probably pretty soon. Yeah. Although, I mean, this whole sequence is kind of pointless, but we do get to see just what English people think of pushing Americans, since it's such an effective use by Richard Harris to get kicked out of the casino that he goes to.
Well, yeah, it was like he was putting on an act to try to get people away from the table.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can I do this? I'm going to be an annoying drunk American. Like, hey, this place is hopping tonight, Jim. What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us what you really think of Americans without really telling us what you think of Americans.
But I do love one part of this scene is when they do get up to the room and they find Sean and they explain everything to him and they got to get out of there. When Alan asks Rafer, "What are you carrying?" and he pulls out a snub-nosed 38 and a pineapple grenade. He's like, "I got this and I got this." Sort of balances me out. For some reason, I love that scene because
except that he's hiding from the mob upstairs from probably a mob casino.
Yeah. That's a stupid setting for him to be hiding. But yeah, and then of course he does the door punch grenade drop, which is also kind of neat. I don't know if I've ever seen that in a movie before, where somebody punches through a door to drop a grenade. So then the gang is together, and they have their meeting with Rushton to get their plan approved by their benefactors.
Mm-hmm.
Rafer lays out the plan with the scale model of the prison and everything.
Which I remember when I saw that, I was like, where do they get a scale model? And then I remembered the kid was a car modeler. So either it runs in the Rafer's family, or Rafer made the model. Either way, it was good foreshadowing with a model car.
Didn't Faulkner ask for that at the beginning, though?
He needs a model?
Well, I don't know if he asked for a model, but he got the plans for where they're holding him. So he had those plans that he laid out.
Oh, I'm sure he asked for the intelligence. It just occurs to me that whenever I see a model like that, you know somebody's got to do it, and someone's got a copy of Fine Scale Modeler hanging around the office.
Yeah, they've got an artisan that works downtown where it's like, God damn it, I got to build another one of these things.
Well, he did ask for a lot of money up front.
That's true. But he lays out the plan. It's a pretty tight plan, too.
And it's pretty dark. They're going to cyanide the barracks.
Yeah, that's when he lays out the plan where it's like, well, what about the 200 men inside? And he's like, oh, we'll use cyanide gas canisters and we'll kill them while they're asleep.
And even the benefactors are like, wow.
They're like, what? The UN will go fucking mad. And they're like, well, the UN's not going to know about this. Because who's going to tell him? Like, Ndofa's not going to tell him because he's got too much to answer for.
Yeah.
It's horrifying, but it's also, I mean, this is what mercenaries would do. This is how cavalier about it they would be. It's like, no, if you want your guy, those 200 guys have to die, and probably another 200 guys if we have to fight our way out.
I think Richard Harris mentions this about, what it's going to take, and they convince all the killing. He's like, these Simbas are going to kill a lot of people anyway. Basically, they're trusting that their enemy are the worst humans ever, and are therefore, you might as well kill them and kill them all.
Yeah.
And that turns on just a few small words of description. And then they are in, and the audience, at least the 78 audience, is there along with them, because for then on out, their enemies are cannon fodder.
I feel like during the late 70s, too, there was a lot of vilification of African nations anyway in their army. Kind of like how Limbani was a allegory for Nelson Mandela. I feel like General Ndofa was basically kind of a placeholder Idi Amin type. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like public sentiment about leaders and those kind of armies were, and still are today to a certain extent, those guys are just absolute animals.
But they don't do too much with the leader. I mean, we don't see a lot of scenes of the other side except when they're rushing at them.
Yeah, they want to make them pretty much as faceless as possible.
Yeah.
And unless they're getting blown up by grenades and doing somersaults in the air, or like you said, like running at them with their machetes. They're either mad dogs or they're sneaking around in the bushes trying to cut your throat. Mm-hmm. So they don't humanize the bad guys whatsoever. But, that was the time, and that was how they had to make the bad guys bad. They had to kind of justify why the good guys were doing such bad things and still being the good guys in the narrative anyway.
Well, yeah, and Rafer even justifies it to the priest later on.
Yeah, exactly. And Roger Moore, when Rushton goes to leave, has a great line too. He has some really good quips in this movie that kind of go under the radar. But he says about Rushton, if that guy's back was any straighter, his spine would snap.
As a Roger Moore performance, I like this better than most of the Bond stuff because he's got a little bit more room to breathe.
Yeah, and he's not doing the Roger Moore thing where every time he says something cute or witty, he kind of makes that face where it's like, how funny I can be. And I feel like he did that through so many of the Bond movies where it's like, here's me being flirty. And it just, it gets on my nerves. But I like that he's more serious in this one, even when he's delivering lines like that.
Yeah, I feel like I get to know Roger Moore a little better, at least past his Bond.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated with Roger Moore in this period when he's not playing Bond.
Yeah, I've got to rewatch the Seawolves.
I've never seen that one. I've seen Folks, but it's been a long time. Mm-hmm. And he did a movie with Lee Marvin called Shout at the Devil, which I haven't seen in 20 years, but I remembered liking. But he did some interesting stuff. So from that scene, and then of course, Rushton tells him we're moving this up 3 weeks, and then Rafer's like despondent over it. Alan apologizes to him, says, I didn't know. And Rafer's like, I know, it's fine. Whatever, let's change the subject.
I think that's what made me suspicious, because from the very beginning, I had thought of Burton as just this, don't trust a single word he says. And when he said, I had no idea about this, that's what gave me doubts. It's possible he did have no idea about it, but just the human he is makes me suspicious of him, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's hard to trust a guy that does what he does, and for all intents and purposes, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
So it's hard to justify that he truly didn't know. So that's what makes that a really fascinating conversation.
Well, another thing that occurs to me is if you took Colonel Alan Faulkner's CV, his resume, and attached it to anybody else, they could be the villain in 10 other movies.
Yeah.
0 to 60. Oh, well, yeah. I'm the bad guy. I've been a mercenary in Africa for the last 20 years. My name's Faulkner. And you would believe it, and you would hate him.
Yeah, like he could be a heavy for like a Bond villain, where it's like, oh, he's got this guy, Colonel Faulkner. That's his right-hand man. He was a mercenary for 20 years. He was in the Congo. He was in the Limbani crisis and all this other shit. Hell, he killed 200 men with cyanide gas.
With cyanide? Only a supervillain would do that.
He's got the resume of a supervillain bodyguard or something.
Yeah, but he happens to be the hero of this one.
Well, and it kind of goes to show you that heroes and villains, it's all about perception.
Yep.
From that scene, Faulkner goes to recruit. Once they're approved, he goes and recruits Sandy, the sergeant major, who's played by Jack Watson, who is my second favorite character in this movie. Yeah,
he's great. I think him and what's his name, Ronald Fraser, I think they have the same broken nose.
Yeah, oh yeah. Like he looks like somebody's badass grandfather that used to be a boxer and just still looks like he could kick the living shit out of anybody. I mean, he was just a very, like, when I think of like an old school British tough guy, like I think of Sandy.
Yeah, and he's kind of the Arlie Ermy of this movie.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's the drill sergeant, but he seems like a really sweet dude too, which is such a contrast to how hardcore he is.
Yeah.
When Faulkner gets there, he's like, "So, how's retirement?" He's like, "Well, fucking rose bushes are getting whipped into shape, like, he's making fun of his station, basically. That all I'm doing is clipping rose bushes, dude. Like, I'm bored to tears."
Well, I always thought that the ease with which a lot of his old ex-compatriots fell in with the plan just kind of spoke to how ineffective they were at living any life beyond their service in the military. I mean, these are basically broken people who can't adjust. They're almost Rambo level, having a hard time dealing with society. And Faulkner knows that, and he's preying on that.
Yeah.
Funny that Sandy's wife sees right through all that shit too.
Oh yeah, and she knows him well enough to be like, oh shit, this guy's going to show up. He's going to offer him a job, and he's going to take it. And that's why she's flipping him so much shit, is because she already knows at that point, like, she's probably already inside crying.
Yeah.
Because she knows that he's not going to say no, because it's the first thing that's going to make him get back into what he does best. Sandy has a line that he says to Alan right there, and it's so telling, and it tells you everything you need to know about his character. And he asks him, "I'm not too old?" And he's genuinely concerned that he might be too old. "I can't do what I used to do as good as I used to do it. Am I still useful?" And it's a beautiful little piece of acting that he throws out there. And Faulkner kind of puts him at ease, and he's like, "No, hell no. You're right in line, and you're the best I've ever known." Great little scene. Faulkner knows how. He's like, "Yeah, come on in. She'll be glad to see you." And he's like, "Oh, I highly doubt that." Yeah, we better talk out here, because she's gonna fucking throw a frying pan at me.
The same thing with like a lot of the rest of the guys. They're broken, non-functioning, and looking for relevance.
Yep. Yeah, they just want the action again. What does Tosh say when they're doing the interviews? He's like, "I'm a plumber now, sir. Doesn't fit me." He says, like, he's like, "Yeah, I got a wife." He's like, "If I get selected for the mission, I'll write her a letter." These guys are just all about that life.
Well, also, I think in the 70s, in the movie's reality, it was heralding that. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people probably took a lot of the wrong lessons from this movie in a lot of ways, and this is just one of them. I mean, looking at this now, I don't remember what I felt about it as a kid. I'm sure I wasn't thinking, "Oh no, Jock, you're going to throw your entire life away." No, everything that everybody was doing was noble.
Yeah, you got to go on this mission.
Yeah, missions are cool.
So while he's recruiting Sandy, Sean Finn goes to get their fourth executive officer, a guy that he's worked with before named Peter Coetzee, who's
Yep.
played by Hardy Kruger. He is hanging out at a bar, and Finn shows up, reintroduces himself. How you doing? I'm looking for you. I need you for a job. Peter establishes that he's broke and that all he wants to do is get back to Africa. So Sean is basically like, well, have I got a job for you then?
Yeah. And then it's montage of the NCOs and the enlisted men.
Yeah, it's the recruiting the team at the hotel, which is it's kind of like a job interview where they do like a mass thing where they're just interviewing people at a hotel room, which is I've been to one of those before. It's kind of fun.
I think if they'd made this movie in the 90s, it would have gone faster and it would have had a beat to everybody answering the questions. I can see Michael Bay going through that.
Yeah, and there would have been a lot of like zoom in rack shots and kind of like the interrogations in Armageddon when they're like talking to them before they become astronauts.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get to meet the non-coms. Tosh, who I just mentioned, worked with Faulkner, so they're familiar with him.
Yep.
He was played by a guy named Ian Ewell, who was actually a mercenary in the Congo. And he worked under Mad Mike Hoare, who was the technical advisor for this movie. And Tosh, the guy, Ian Ewell, was also a technical advisor. And I love to see when stuntmen and when tech advisors and stuff like that get roles in movies. I think that's kind of neat.
Is he the one with the great big mustache?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with Jesse, one of the most capable of the entire team. He does a lot of the heavy lifting. He's the one that shoots the bazooka. And whenever the plane's attacking, he's the one that Rafer yells out to take it down. Yeah, he's a good character. Sergeant Jesse shows up, and he's got the afro, and he's like, I'm completely broke and I need a job. And can I have some money for a haircut?
And also, the medic, Arthur Whitty.
Yes.
He's a fascinating character.
Yeah, Tosh, Jesse, Jock, who is one of the other non-coms. And he's the one that they give shit for being too old. But he has
I remember.
And for being out of shape, which he really wasn't. He was in the same shape all of them.
True, but at first he said, well, I'm 42, and I looked at him and I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah, you're 67. People just looked so much older back then. I don't understand. Maybe it was the cigarettes. Maybe it was diet. I don't know.
Cigarettes
maybe
and booze.
People. I mean, even Whitty, like Doctor the medic.
Yep.
Arthur Whitty. Love this character. He's my third favorite character in the film. He's flamboyantly gay, and they kind of go out of their way to let you know that.
Yeah.
But I love that it's not a lot of the stereotypical, especially for the time, gay things. He doesn't show up with a pink suit on or anything like that. He looks like a normal guy. He's a doctor. He's practicing.
Well, but he also, they flamboyant him up a little bit, like when he's bidding adieu to the guys all driving off to have one last night of fun in the truck. Kind of looks like he stepped off a sitcom from the early 80s a bit.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, he's have fun, darlings. Like, yeah, he's but a really good character. And he even says, like, I'm tired of treating hemorrhoids. And what does he say? I'm wiping cream on asses. He's like, I'm tired of rubbing cream on people's butts. And he's just tired of the mundane life of being a doctor or whatever he's doing.
I suppose. I guess you can say that someone who would rather be in Africa killing people than in a hospital helping people, the medical profession is probably best without him.
You're not wrong. I think it's less him wanting to kill people and more him wanting to take care of
his guys.
He wants to take care of those men. He's at his best when he's taking care of other soldiers. And I think he might be the most noble character in this entire film.
Maybe.
Because it's more, he's willing to risk life and limb, and boy does he. Yeah, he's a great character. So yeah, and then those are the main ones that we see, and then I mean there's a whole bunch more that we don't even get introduced to until later. Rafer goes to the school and tells his son about Christmas and how they can't go on their trip and they'll have to do it later and all that, and his son gets pissed off and runs back to play football. Very disappointed, understandably.
Yeah.
And then we get the training montage in Swaziland.
Oh yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. I think it goes on a little too long.
Yes, but at least we're on the correct side of the F-bomb divide, so Sandy gets to really let him have it.
Oh my God, he's so fun to watch in this.
Yeah.
And he's full metal jacket, throwing out that Sergeant Hartman and just, listen to me, you are in for a big fucking surprise.
Yeah, can you
And
imagine how this would have gone if they'd done it in the 50s or 60s? It wouldn't have been half as entertaining.
oh no, and he's, you get up, you fucking abortion. And he shoots right next to the guy's head that won't get up. And
Yeah, even Burton, he's pushing around
yeah,
the boss.
he's like, with all due respect, sir, if you don't get up, I'm gonna fucking tear your arms off. And it shows you, even as sweet of a dude as he is, and as much as he loves those guys, it shows how mean he can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he has some really terrible shit that he says to Whitty. What does he say? I'm going to sew your asshole shut. and Whitty has a kind of a self-deprecating line. He's like, "Oh no, God in His infinite wisdom would never allow that to happen." And I had to watch it with subtitles so that I could catch some of that stuff, because a lot of it is kind of said under the breath or whatever. But yeah, he gets those guys into shape. When Roger Moore jumps off that parachute landing training simulator.
Yeah, that looks legit painful.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like if I did that, I would literally re-rip my knee.
Yeah.
And he jumps off there and he like lands hard and he gives him shit. And he's like, "You're not jumping out of a whorehouse window. Do it again."
That's one of the best lines.
Did you see where the one guy falls off of the big pole or whatever when they're holding it up?
Teeter-totter?
The teeter-totter thing, and he falls, and when he hits the ground, he bounces.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is that they had like a rubber mat and they had dirt on top of it, because you don't bounce off dirt like that.
Yeah, it was an interesting little montage they had going.
The music during that scene, it kind of goes with that scene. Mm-hmm. But that type of music, that military snare drum, whimsical whistle music.
Yeah, the kind of jaunty, going on missions is fun music.
Yeah, it's very parade centric. It's very like, and I feel like there's a little bit of like Bridge on the River Kwai with that.
Yeah, I noticed after they hit the, not to skip too far ahead, but they use that later when things are still going right. That's the everything's going right music.
Well, and they use that at the beginning of the mission too, when they're like halo jumping, and it just doesn't fit, because that's a very serious thing. It's like, okay, we're jumping out of this plane, and they're playing this.
That's because someone said they should do the sequence and do the air dancing with the parachute stuff, which I'm pretty sure they don't do that in Halo jumps, but for some reason it's in there, and it seems whimsical and fun. And I guess the audience doesn't know any better. So let's show people twirling around while they're free falling.
I feel like maybe there might be an overcompensation thing too with this movie. These guys are about to do some pretty awful shit.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to kind of whimsy it up to make them the good guys.
Oh, okay. I'll buy that.
Yeah. Does that track? Yeah. I mean, because I feel like right after they land and they get to that prison, they murder 200.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's part of any of the, like in Rise and Fall movies, you got to make the rise particularly entertaining. Gangsters have even more fun before they have horrible endings. And this mission is even more kind of badass, adventure-y before things get terrible.
Yeah, that makes sense. After the first training day, they are talking about how to take out the sentry, and Peter recommends using a cyanide-tipped crossbow to take them out fast and silent.
Yeah, I wondered why they left it to when they're already in Africa to bring that up.
Yeah, it was a little out of place. It's a lot easier to get that shit when you're in England than it is in Swaziland, I would imagine.
Yeah, but I guess the script needed that to happen at that point, or maybe there was a lag and something they needed to put that somewhere.
Well, I think they had to explain that there was cyanide-tipped crossbow darts, and they couldn't do that while they were on the mission and about to shoot it. Mm-hmm. So they had to kind of set up that exposition, but they also used that as an excuse for Peter to kind of talk about his personal politics.
Yeah.
And that he's South African and how he feels about black people. They set him up as racist, and how he's kind of on that mission begrudgingly, because he basically says, even though I don't particularly like them, but I don't like killing people that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got morals, but he's also a mercenary.
Yeah, but I think there was a little bit of self-congratulation going on in his entire arc. Just the way everything is, not to get too far ahead of it, but the way he learns a special lesson about life from a man he would have always looked down on.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. There's their bonding moment. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like they have to kind of set up. He's calling him Cafford, and that's a South African term. It's kind of like their N-word, and it's a very racist term. So they have to they demonize him a little bit in that moment. It's a strange dichotomy because they're demonizing him, but they're also kind of setting up that he has a moral compass, because it's like, it's fine. Like, if I'm defending my homeland, that's one thing, but like, I don't know anything about these guys, but I'll do this because it's a means to an end.
Everything they say about him is a little too on point for me for arriving at his life lesson. I mean, even the bit about all his history in Africa and what he thinks about African politics.
And then they get the news that they've moved up the timeline to Christmas. So they have less training time.
Terrible Christmas.
Yeah. And they also find out that General Ndofu, he's moving on Limbani's position, and that's why they have to move it up. But he's also using his Simbas, which are his elite guard, which is kind of foreshadowing that, okay, this is going to be a lot tougher than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't get him out in the amount of time, because really, if you look at the plan that they have, they're there for less than 3 hours. They land, they take out the guards, they gas the guys, they grab him, they get back on the plane, out of there.
Easy peasy.
You kind of know it's not going to go right, because they're like, well, he's got his elite guard, and there's going to be a whole regiment of them there, and it could get bad. Faulkner tries to send Sandy home at this point, done with training, and Sandy refuses heartily.
Yeah, and that's actually a moving speech there.
Oh, absolutely, and it's quick, but Sandy basically says, with all due respect, sir, you can shove that up your ass. And, believe it or not, I care about these guys, and most importantly, I care about you and the other officers.
Yeah, love these guys. I always thought it was weird that he wants to send Sandy home, but he won't send Rafer home, especially given that what Rafer adds to the team is his planning, and it's been planned. And really, what is Rafer there for? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's pretty capable, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah, he's a good operator, but they have plenty of good operators.
True. He needs him there just in case things go south.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that happens. And he has to kind of he's immediately turns to him and says, okay, what do we do? Like, how do we get out of this?
Yeah.
He's the man with the plan. So I feel like you always want to keep that guy close to the vest.
Okay. Yeah, that tracks. It also seems like, in a way, Burton is kind of on almost like this vision quest to prove his relevance, and he needs his team there to almost as much for moral support as for the tactical stuff that they add to the team. He needs Rafer on a more deep level than he needs Sandy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Sandy's, he's older, and I don't think he's a liability, but I feel like there's that concern that he might be. I feel like it was easier for him to say, okay, well, you've trained the guys, you've done a great job, just go home, enjoy your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But
go back to that lovely wife who hates me.
Yeah, go back to your wife that hates my guts. So he refuses because Sandy's really the heart of this team. He's like, nope, wherever you guys go, I'm going. They have the men make out their wills, and Woody has his line about the guy asks him, who are you making yours out to? And he's like, the best proctologist in England. And then the guy's like, what's a proctologist? And he's like, it's a bum doctor.
Bum doctor.
But I love that. I love that Woody's, he's getting out in front of the gay jokes himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's not waiting for any of those guys to do that. He's just like, nope, I'm going to get out in front of it and own it. And I feel like it's a really empowering thing. And I feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm ignorant to this, but at this time, I feel like a lot of gay characters didn't do that. But
I definitely think he's putting his toe in the water. He's doing as much as he can without, there's a lot of nodding and winking, but it's definitely there.
I feel like, especially in an action movie.
Yeah.
An action movie in 1978 for a gay character to be that progressive about it. Imagine if Michael Bay directed this movie. How over the top would this gay character be?
Oh, it would have been the hairdresser from The Rock.
Yeah.
He would have been out and super flamboyant.
Yeah, and it would have gotten to cartoony levels. And I feel like Woody never gets cartoony.
Yeah, that's true.
He's always, even when he's being flamboyant, he's very grounded.
Mm-hmm.
I really love his character. And then they let all the guys go to town to blow off some steam before they head out. Whitty doesn't go, and he waves them all goodbye and bids them well. What does he say? I'll be here with bandages and penicillin.
Yeah, well, he'll need to be.
So then Rafer and Faulkner take a walk and talk about life and things. And Rafer basically says, if anything happens to me on this mission, I want you to make sure that my son's taken care of.
Which is the worst parenting decision maybe in the history of movies of 1970s.
Oh, absolutely. And Faulkner even tells him that. He's like, what? He's like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. What is your IQ? 2? he's like, when I'm not getting paid to kill complete strangers, I'm a fucking out of work drunk. And he even has the line, don't you have any decent friends?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best question of the entire movie, maybe. I mean,
well, it shows a lot of prescience on his part too, and I love how self-deprecating he is, where he's just like, no, I'm a fucking piece of shit, dude. Like, I'm an alcoholic. Like, don't you have any normal friends that you can have do this?
And I guess the answer is no. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't even want him with the boy's mom who went off to Paris.
Yeah, he thinks that a hired killer is a better father figure, better parent for this child than his actual mother.
Yeah, that kid's pretty doomed.
Yeah, oh, that kid's fucked. But I love how Faulkner kind of owns himself at that point, where he's just like, yeah, I have I'm the wrong man for this. I mean, I'll do it because you're my buddy, but this is not a wise decision.
Although I did get the sense that confessing how bad that he would be as a choice, and also Harris realizing that was kind of a load off his shoulders. Like Burton might have been feeling this guilt for getting this guy to come and potentially screwing up his life, and maybe Harris didn't know how bad he was, and that when he gets to tell him, oh, I'm terrible, that was such a load off his shoulders, and that he's kind of relieved that Harris doesn't have friends that are better people to leave the son with, because it makes what Burton is doing that less horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
But it's a short-lived little bonding moment, and they're packing into the C-130.
Yeah, they head off. Is that a C-130 or that's a Hercules, right?
Yeah, Hercules C-130.
That's right. So yeah, so then they load up on the C-130 and they head out for the mission.
And one of the things I noticed is that Richard Burton in a parachute helmet is why we needed Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone because it's really not a good look. I was really relieved that he got rid of that early.
Well, those helmets in general, I mean, they all look like Spaceballs.
Yeah.
Not very flattering. And so they all jump out of the airplane. All 50 men on the team land, and they make out for the compound. They're trying to shoot day for night here to insinuate that this is early in the morning.
Yeah, I feel like they went a little too light on the day for night.
Yeah, it's more like day for sunglasses.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of perplexed me, because the director of photography on this movie was Jack Hildyard, and he shot Bridge on the River Kwai, maybe the best men on a mission movie ever made, and he got an Academy Award for that. So every time I would see scenes that were like either overlit or weirdly lit, I'm like, why? When you have an Academy Award winning DP in this movie, and all I'm guessing is that they either made him go too fast, or Andrew McLaglen is just not a very visual director, and the quality kind of goes downhill from that.
His reputation as a director was very workmanlike. He was solid, but he wasn't an auteur.
Right. He did a lot of TV, it looks like, and it seems like it shows here.
Well, and he did a lot of Westerns too, and I feel like this has a lot of Western overtones to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very utilitarian, I'd say.
Yeah.
Even the action scenes are, when they'd throw a grenade and the Simbas would pirouette in the air as they flew.
Yeah.
Well, it's like an old vaudevillian Western where they throw dynamite and guys are like, blah! They fly through the air as it explodes. Yeah, the one scene when Burton shoots the one guy and then they have the blood spraying out of his neck, and they use this same scream 2 or 3 times in the movie.
Uh-huh.
It's not a Wilhelm scream, but it's kind of their version of it.
Yeah, it's
And
this kind of anguish. Yeah, that's exact, and it doesn't go with the rest of it. And there are a lot of people being killed kind of in the same way, so that stands out.
Yeah, I know I heard it at least 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's solid, but it's not inspiringly directed whatsoever.
I wonder what a Guy Hamilton would have done. I feel like we needed him from time to time.
Oh yeah, that would have been interesting. Yeah, I think, I mean, you know how I feel about remakes, but I feel like this movie would be a very interesting remake in the hands of a more action centric director
Oh, definitely.
with more of a visual style.
I'd love to see like what a Michael Mann could do with this, because he's no stranger to a gunfight, and he likes the whole global crime warlord stuff. I mean, I can see him wanting to wrap his head around that. He could
Oh,
do something
absolutely.
cool with it.
Absolutely.
I was missing Michael Mann in some of the gunfights here.
Yeah, and the fact that every one of the firearms in this movie sounded the same.
Yeah.
A little disheartening with that too, where the 9mm Uzis sounded just like the squad assault weapons and the Vickers machine gun on the airstrip. So they make for the compound. It's early morning, I guess. They take out the sentries with the crossbow laced with cyanide.
Which, when I was a kid, that was like the most badass thing ever. But
Oh yeah.
somehow, I guess I've been spoiled by The Walking Dead. So this particular crossbow looked like Hardy Kruger got it at KB Toys.
Oh yeah, it's a very rudimentary crossbow, and the way he made it sound, it was like Excalibur or something.
Yeah.
Like the one I'm thinking of kills at 300 feet.
Yeah.
And if that thing would kill at 300 feet, I mean, he had to like rainbow arch that thing to get it 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And when he fired that, I don't know if you slowed down the movie or anything, but I mean, that thing, that bolt was wobbling.
Yeah.
Because that, just having that little cyanide ampule on there would throw off the balance of that thing so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a cool scene.
When I was a kid, the whole crossbow thing just screamed super professional, killers, even more than like just regular soldiering. These guys are like better than soldiers. They're like ninja soldiers.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really upbeat music right after he kills those sentries.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're like chopping through the fence and getting into the perimeter, it really threw me off. Like, it took me right out of the scene. It's just so upbeat. I just feel like tonally it was kind of shitty, way too whimsical at that point. Because I mean, they're literally going inside to cyanide gas 200 people.
Yeah, and that whole thing just was kind of creepy. Just going through, and also not even putting their mask on until they're inside. And luckily for them, everyone was asleep.
Yeah, there's not that one guy that's got insomnia and he's just like, oh, I'm just going to sit over here and, play tic-tac-toe with myself.
Yeah.
They have a Cuban military advisor.
Yeah, I saw that.
Kind of an odd choice.
I had heard about, like, in the history of these things, that the Cubans were all over Africa.
I feel like that's probably Mike Hoare saying, like, giving them that information and being like, oh yeah, it's a lot of countries in Africa use Cuban military, because otherwise, like, why even have him there? Like, they don't explain it, but they call him out like, yeah, check the Cuban.
Yeah.
And then the Cuban had the keys. It's just such an interesting detail. So they spring Lambani, they get him out of his cell. Faulkner puts Peter in charge of, he makes Lambani his responsibility.
Yeah, which I thought was just the weirdest decision.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like a coach or like a manager, like, you know what, this is a teachable moment, and I'm going to use this moment to make him not a racist anymore.
Well, also that, but he's literally using one of their best operators as the mule, when riding on someone's back could have been, or being the person who carries that guy could have been the job of any of the other 40 guys who are there, who are just the enlisted guys.
I mean, obviously it happened for the sake of the plot, but
oh yeah,
I mean, there were two African-American members of this squad, and one of them was big as a house. I mean, he was a big, mountain of a dude. And why didn't he carry him? Like, put that guy in charge of that, And not only that, but like, Lambani doesn't see a lot of white people and hasn't talked to anybody in over 2 years other than his prison guard. Might freak him out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, script's got a script.
Because what is the first thing that Peter says to him when he picks him up and puts him on his back? He calls him a Kaffir.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, all right, Kaffir, let's go. And it's like, oh, okay. So this guy's going to take care of me? Shit. And then, so while they're doing that, they send Sean Finn to take the airfield to secure their escape. They do that with ease.
Yeah, the whole mission's gone perfect up till now.
Oh, it's butter smooth.
Yeah.
So you just know some shit's going to go wrong.
Well, they're still playing the jaunty "Everything's Going Right" music as they drive out of the compound and take over the airport.
Yeah, they go back to the airport and everything's hunky-dory and the guys are they can taste that champagne. The plane is on the way. Right before it gets there, Rushton, Matherson's second in command, makes the call to the Hercules pilots and tells them to pass them by, and which is what they call Charlie 1. And that's kind of like their Order 66 from the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that means the order is in, so leave them.
But they had already landed too, so they've got to take off.
Yeah, so they really cut it close on that one.
But at least they said good luck.
Yeah, they said, sorry, orders, good luck, which sucks, but I love the acting in this scene, especially from Hardy Kruger.
Mm-hmm.
When they're all celebrating and he tells them, like, get him up, let's get ready to get on the plane, and then they all see it take off. The look on Hardy Kruger's face, that's every soldier that's ever been left out to dry.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, his mouth's open and he's just watching that thing take off, and it's just in absolute disbelief. And even when you're a hardened soldier, like, nothing can prepare you for something like that. And just, you see it, like he makes you feel it when you see him in that scene. Yeah,
it's good. I'm surprised I don't know him in very many more movies as good as he was in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he had a really good career, but he didn't do a ton after this. He did some straight to, like, made for TV stuff and just a few things, but nothing huge. And I mean, I know he was in Flight of the Phoenix, the original with Jimmy Stewart, and Bridge Too Far. He did, I think, the year before this. Yeah, I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff, but great face for the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see why the Nazis used him for their propaganda film, even as a 12-year-old. So then Alan, Rafer, and Sean have to plan their extraction and figure out what they're going to do from there. I love that Alan's first thing is, I'm going to go talk to the men. And he goes out on the tower and he's like, men, we have been double-crossed, but don't worry, we will find a way out of here. Thank you. That's literally all he fucking says to them. And they're all just standing there like still in shock from what just happened. And he's like, don't worry. It's a very, like, corporate meeting mentality that he's got going on there. It's like, don't worry. I promise you we will get to the bottom of this. That is all for now. We'll keep you posted. And then back in London, Matherson toasts to his double-cross deal with Ndofa, so they confirm what we already know. They decide to head south. It's their only option. Mm-hmm. I feel like they dragged this scene out a little bit, too, with the way Rafer explains it to Faulkner, where he's like, I'm going to give it to you emotionally first and then rationally. And he basically says the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And he's not overly emotional when he says it the first time. So it's just, it's kind of like padding the script a little bit, I feel like. He should have just said, okay, the only option we have is to go south, and here's why. But he takes the long way around the barn to get to that. And
this is explaining the Civil War.
How he wants to incite a civil war and get the entire country on their side, or else they're screwed. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I get it, but it's also like, I mean, and that never comes to fruition either. Like, that just doesn't pay off. That's their plan, and then that plan doesn't work. So
very pie in the sky for someone whose main job is as a planner. Like, it sounds exactly like, you know what? We put on a play to raise money to buy more guns and ammunition.
Yeah, it's a lofty idea. And so you can see why Faulkner's like, no, just get us the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Why did I bring you?
I mean, it's really the only option they have. But he posits it as like, let's rally this whole country, and it doesn't work. I mean, they get to the village, they show them Limbani, and they're like, we'll fight, but we don't have anything to fight with.
We could barely survive a single Cessna.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean the villagers and everything, and the people of this country. They're like, even if we could rally everybody, they got sticks and spears. Like,
Well, also, I mean, when those guys show up at the village, the villagers hate them. They're they're afraid of them. They've got
yeah,
the right idea. Guys with guns coming, running up to their village is never a good thing. They know what
yeah,
time it is.
and that's why the father, Geohagen, or however you say that word,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
played by Frank Finley, is
Hmm.
introduced, and he's just like, yeah, so what the hell are you guys doing? Like he doesn't know what they're there for, but he's like, yeah, you guys can fuck off somewhere. Like you're just here to hurt people.
Yeah, he's like maybe the most honest character outside of Sandy's wife.
Team rolls out in their stolen trucks and jeeps from the airport, and they are heading south. And they get to a dry riverbed with a stone bridge. Matherson has dispatched a Cessna with machine guns and bombs on it to take them out. And it shows up and starts strafing them and takes out, what, about 15 of their guys out of the 50?
Yeah, something like that. This is where I kind of had a problem with just the staging of the action because a twin engine Cessna or whatever that was, you really got to screw up to as a soldier to be slaughtered by that thing.
Oh yeah, and they were shooting. They were actively shooting at that thing
With everything.
with everything they had. They were using their machine guns. They were using their Uzis. They were using rifles. Somebody's going to take that thing down. And let's not forget, they had a bazooka.
Oh yeah.
They could have shot that. They could have blown that thing out of the sky on the first run.
Yeah, I guess my biggest problem is that he said everybody take cover, and they had a good 20, 30 seconds before that thing rolled around and got a beat on them, and they were still not out of that truck yet.
Oh no, and a lot of them were just kind of sitting there in awe, watching it, like, oh, like they were like deer in headlights. Like, dude, get cover, run.
I think
What are you doing?
it's because the script needed about 10 or 15 of them to die. That's it, and they couldn't figure out a better way to do it except make this Cessna pilot like a hero ace or something who's so great at mowing down mercenaries.
Yeah, well, and they couldn't make it like like an actual warplane, like a P-51 or something like that. It had to be a Cessna with a fucking drop tank full of napalm on it or whatever that was.
Yeah.
And like machine guns fixed to it. Like, but they definitely, this is where the attrition starts in this movie.
Yeah.
Where they have to start whittling away at that 50-man team. Like you said, like they had to trim the fat. They cut them off by napalming the bridge. And so Faulkner, Jesse, Whitty, Peter, and Lambani are separated from the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And Faulkner yells out to Rafer, go ahead to Kalima Village. We'll meet you there. We'll find a way across the river down. And there's 3 guys that are wounded, but they're mortally wounded, but they're still alive. And Faulkner kind of draws the short straw, even though they don't really do it.
Well, he gets the $100,000. He's got that job.
Yeah, that's he's got to pay that manager check,
Yeah.
It's always not sat well with me though that the guy that knows he's about to get a bullet in his head
Is
smiles at him like, "Oh hi."
Yeah.
And he smiles back
weird.
like, yeah, I'm going to shoot you in the fucking eye now. And then
that was weird.
You can only assume that he shoots all 3 of them because you hear 3 gunshots.
Mm-hmm.
They don't show it, but he headshots all 3. And it's done for emotional effect, and you see Lambani reacting to it. So then Peter is carrying Lambani, and they have their bonding, a few different bonding moments where they have a bunch of conversation, and the movie kind of really delivers this message of unity. It's a good message. It's just really sloppily delivered.
Oh, I agree completely.
And it's there to make you feel good, but it's really wedged in there. Everything that they're saying is true, but it's also like this isn't the time or place, man.
Yeah. Also, it's facile how it's like the president delivers his monologue, which is fine, and then this years-long racist immediately, oh, I agree now. He said, I wrote this down. You're beginning to sound good to me. Maybe you're just the man.
Yeah, maybe you're just the man we need. And then Jesse, the other African American in this little crew smiles and nods his head.
My God, this movie cured racism.
Like, yeah, that's right. Let's not be racist anymore. And I mean, yes, like absolutely, slow clap. Like, good job, guys. But also, you need to get your asses out of there. Like, it was a little bit too Mary Sue. You know, it was a little bit too.
Oh, like, exactly.
And we need to be better about everything, or else we're not going to have a world to fight for.
And also that it's going to kind of dovetail into this action scene where he's got the president on his back and he's shielding him and fighting at the same time, which, by the way, it seems just stupid. Here, sit behind this tree while I go kill these guys way more effectively. Then I'll pick you up after that's done.
Yeah,
but no.
Well, the whole thing I got from that, too, is he's running with him on his back, and it's almost like he's got the momentum, and that's the only thing I can wrap my head around, where it's like, no, just slow down and take cover and fight instead of like trying to run right up those guys' throat.
All I can guess is that it sounded good in the script or in the script writing, you know, guys getting together or the screenwriter talking with the director. What about this as a scene? He's got him on his back, and it's symbolic of them finally coming together as a black man and a white man or something like this. And they go, oh yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, he's wearing him like a backpack. and it's like they're one person, you know, they're moving as one being. Watching it a little while ago, right before the episode here, I got a lot of the same feelings that I did watching the first Lord of the Rings movie at the end when Boromir dies. I don't know why. It's a different scene, but I got that same kind of like, oh, they're killing him, but help is right around the corner. Because he literally dies right there, and then Sandy shows up with the backup team.
Yeah, they heard the gunshots, and they came running, I guess.
Yeah. And
mystified that much.
Yeah, they were right fucking there. As Peter dies, you know, he hugs him, and he rubs his head on his, and he's like, don't die. Please don't die. Like, you've got to make it. It's a beautiful little scene, but it's so jammed in there. Like, they needed. It's frustrating to me because if they would have cut out the whole retrieving Sean Finn part in London,
yeah, they might have had time for that.
Yeah, they would have had an extra 10 minutes of character building for that scene to pay off.
Yeah, it's clunky, and it shows just how hard action movies are to write sometimes. They're swinging for the fences, and this one was a swing and a miss, given that they're going right next into some more action.
The rest of the team goes to Kalima Village, which is right around the corner. The rest of the team reaches the village, and Father, how do you say that? Is it?
I think it's Geoghan.
Geoghan?
I think so. Irish name. I'm probably screwing it up.
Geohan? I don't know how to pronounce that. It's Geohagen. Played by Frank Finlay, who a lot of people will recognize from one of the Three Musketeers movies in the 70s. He was also in the 1985 film Life Force as Dr. Hans Fallada, and he's one of the best parts of that movie. But he's basically just this mean shit of a father.
Well, he definitely hates mercenaries, and I can see his point.
Yeah, he picks no bones about it. And he immediately goes right after him and is just like, yeah, I hate the sight of you. I want you out of here.
Get out of here. Oh, you're just saying that. No, get out of here and die.
No, please go die somewhere away from here. The Simbas find Alan and attack him and his crew on the river. And Whitty is the one that discovers this because he hears them rustling in the bushes.
Yeah. That's a good scene, I thought.
It's a really powerful scene because he stands his ground and he buys the rest of them time to get out of there. And it's an extremely heroic act. And I mean, as soon as he realizes like, oh shit, like that's not an animal moving around out there, that's the bad guys. He opens fire and he gives it everything he's got. And he even tells them, they tell him to get out of there. And he's like, get your lovely asses out of here. I'm just holding the fort. Yeah.
He's got to get some gay jokes in there, even up to the very end.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me thankful that Andrew McLaughlin wasn't the greatest action director, because this is maybe the most violent scene in the movie. Basically a bunch of people knife fighting, and he's going to get hacked to death with big machetes. So I was kind of glad that McLaughlin didn't have the skills to really land that much violence.
Well, it's still really
You know what I mean?
visceral, even though it's very simply shot. I love that he goes full Audie Murphy there, and he
Oh
just
yeah.
he unloads, and there's a lot of, we're going to get to the endless bullets parts of this movie later in the bullet points, but there are just an endless amount of bullets in this movie. But there are a few scenes where people run out of bullets, and this is one of them. And he literally runs that Uzi dry, and then says "fuck it" and pulls out his knife.
Yeah, he plants it in the guy that he'd have rather been dating.
Yeah, he's like, "Look at you, big, beautiful bastards. It's a shame we can't all be friends." And I mean, he puts that right in that dude's heart. He takes him with him.
He maybe has the best death of anybody in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and one of the most heroic. I mean, he goes out swinging.
Mm-hmm. I IMDb'd him, and I was surprised to find out that he was the kind of senile grandfather in 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
That's like, right.
Don't be preposterous. Kevin is dead these many years ago.
I love that they gave him the most, in an extremely manly movie. He had the gay guy has the manliest death out of all.
Yep, that should have earned him a place on the poster.
For sure. Yeah, Woody was the shit.
But that pretty much takes us into the a slight pause for some politics at the village. Then it's pretty much just shooting on our way to the plane, isn't it?
Right. But the golden goose, as it were, in the plot is that Father Geohagen knows that 3 miles away that there is a plane that they can all fly out in.
Yeah, DC-3.
Yep, a Dakota. There's an old Dakota.
Yeah. And then the father has what I think is the best line in the entire movie when he sends those guys on. Well, Roger Moore says, "Father, get on your ass and get out of here." And he literally gets on his an ass right away. But on his way out, he says, "Good luck to you, you godless murderers."
And so they go, and at this point, the Simbas are right around the corner, and there's like an entire regiment of them. So they have to cut and run. On their way to the airfield, they kind of get ambushed a little bit and have to. As soon as that happens, they're on their trail, and then they just kind of come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, basically this last section is them running and gunning and just basically fighting while they're on their way to the plane.
Yep. And pretty much all hell breaks loose. And I mean, it's even, we can't really go like fight by fight, but they kind of pair off in different groups. Sandy and Tosh are kind of holding an action in one position, and that's when Tosh uses the bazooka a few times to the airfield. And then while they're trying to get on the plane, Sandy gets hit and he dies, screams out for Alan.
And then Jock gets killed, doesn't he?
That happens later. They get Limbani on the plane, but he gets hit at least once because you see the blood.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's basically just trying to fight their way to the plane.
Yeah.
Rafer and Jock are set up with 2 other guys and the Vickers machine gun at the end of the airstrip, and they're basically just mowing people down.
Yeah, it helps that the Simbas are just running into the field of fire.
Oh yeah. They're running. I mean, like they don't even know what's happening. It's like, like, here, shoot me. They're like zombies in a video game.
I mean, another way to look at it is, a lot of these armies were just made of kids that were kidnapped as 6 years old and not taught anything but how to fire an AK-47, and then mercenaries come along and just slaughter them.
Yeah, that's true. If it was any like National Guard type of force that they had, I would totally, absolutely agree with that. But they set up that this is General Ndofa's elite guard, the Simbas. So they're like the best that Africa has to offer, essentially. And they are literally running around. Some of them have guns, and they are pulling their machetes out, running into gunfire.
This is also where it seemed conspicuous to me that they didn't have a leader. Like right here, I mean, even if you had an enemy major, not even a general, but or a sergeant, someone who was on the other side leading them a little, but it was like literally an army of all privates with no plan at all. Just run to the enemy and shoot.
Yeah, no field commander. And I feel like if there was, then they wouldn't have all just been running into a hail of gunfire. It doesn't make any sense, but for the sake of the movie, it gave them a lot of people to kill.
Yeah, I guess I was missing the. I guess I would have rather have seen smaller combat, more well choreographed with use of tactics and stuff, rather than just like an almost World War I scenario of people running into fields of fire.
You know what this scene reminds me of, and in a modern, I say modern, it's almost 20 years old now, but modern action movie would be Tears of the Sun.
Oh, okay, the Bruce Willis movie.
Yep, the end of that movie is very similar to this, but it makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
There's a ton of bad guys, and they're just trying to get to this border, and with the doctor and with the refugees or whatever, and they're running and gunning that whole way, and it's much more well done than this, but it's very similar.
Okay, I haven't heard too much about that movie. I mean, culturally, it didn't leave much of a footprint.
I'd love to do that one on the podcast here. It's Antoine Fuqua. It's got a good cast. It's pretty good. It's very straightforward.
I've got the soundtrack to that, which is odd because I don't know much about that movie because it was a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, so I know what it sounds like more than I know its plot.
Yeah, it's another one that has a lot of emotional weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, so yeah, they're all just trying to get on the plane, and Rafer and Jock are pretty much bringing up the caboose, and they wait until the very last second to make their break for the plane. Jock gets shot as he's getting on the plane and later dies. And of course, Rafer's the last man, and he's almost on the plane and loses his grip with Faulkner and falls, and he gets shot in the leg, and he's limping after the plane, but he can't get to it. Yeah. And he looks behind him, and there's just a sea of Simbas, and he knows that they'll literally, cut him to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So he begs Alan to shoot him. And this is, probably I'd say the emotional high point of the movie. Burton, for all his faults, really sells this, where he's like, no, I can't do it. No. And he's really, really distraught. And I can't imagine a worse situation to be in than having to shoot your best friend, keep him from getting chopped into, dog food.
Yeah, it's literally like if you'd had in the planning, like, okay, what's the worst situation to avoid that we want to look out to avoid? We might have to kill one of you to keep them from being, butchered by the enemy. Okay, let's avoid that.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where we've landed.
Exactly. And when he shoots him too, did you catch the little blood splatter that hits the camera lens?
The camera lens, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard scene. It's hard to watch. But yeah, so then they button up the plane and they take off. He goes up to the front. He tells Sean, I had to kill Rafer. They were to cut him up into bits. And I love Roger Moore's reaction to that too.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
He just has kind of like a shocked, like, what? And then
which is impressive because Moore had also been shot in the foot or something. He's flying the plane with a bullet wound on his leg.
He gets shot through the calf, it looks like. And I feel like they're trying to play that up like he's dying while he's flying that plane and trying to get them out of there. But again, It goes nowhere. He wraps his scarf around it, and it's like, okay, that makes it a little bit harder to fly, but
yeah, and it's weird because later when he sets down, he passes out. He just puts his head kind of rolls over, and he closes his eye, and I was like, wait, he got shot in the leg. Did he just die?
I feel like they're trying to allude to that, and then you see him at the very end when he picks up Faulkner.
Yeah, and in the car.
So I feel like there was a little bit of subterfuge going on there where it's like, oh, he died too. And then at the end, you're like, oh, no, he's alive. Yay.
But then Bonnie dies, and they kind of needed him to get permission to land.
I feel like the story he tells them is a little bit convoluted too, where it's like, in 1962, I was at a meeting. The people that were at this meeting are as follows. like it was a secret meeting. Like, who the fuck would know that?
Yeah.
When they call that into the airport, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, they really do have him. Like, it should have been like a password or something like that, like something simpler.
I guess it's a script requirement. You know what I mean? We need him to say something because they won't even let them land. And what he says allows them to land. What do you think that should be? I don't know. Make something up about something that happened in the past that maybe an air traffic controller would buy.
I feel like they dragged this ending out quite a bit. Like, I feel like they could have really truncated that scene. Doing away with all that.
And they had something going with the citizens find out about it and come to the airport and light up the airport. That was kind of neat, but it seemed kind of tacked on with all this whatever political stuff was there with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. We just saved 10 minutes off the fucking ending of this movie. Because he goes up front, then he goes in the back, and then he's like, oh, okay, well, and then he goes back up, and then he's got to read the whole fucking thing, and it's like,
This whole movie could have lost about a half hour of snips here and there, and been a lot more streamlined. But it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nitpick, but I feel like the editing definitely could have been tighter.
Mm-hmm.
I do like it's a quick little scene, but Tosh is the guy with the big mustache is in the back, and he's holding Jock even though he's dead, and he's got his arms around him, and he's like, how's Jock? And he's like, he's dead, sir. He asks him like, what was it all for? It's a great little scene because he's obviously dead, but he's holding on to him.
Yeah.
And it just really shows that camaraderie that these guys had in even just a short amount of time. And then they have to lighten their load. So they literally have to throw him out of the airplane.
Yeah, that's
cool.
cool.
They have to cut the dead weight. Yeah. This isn't a warm and cuddly movie whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about these guys got paid quite a bit, but oh man, the fine print will get you in the end. If we need to throw your body out of the plane, we'll do that. That might have even been in the contract, but they didn't choose to read it.
Yeah, the devil is in the details. After that, they land in Rhodesia. Barely. The plane basically runs out of gas, and they have to coast in.
Sean passes out.
Limbani dies before they land. After that, much later, Faulkner infiltrates Matherson's house, is basically creeping around and has his little standoff with Matherson and says, you owe me a great deal of money. So he has him open his safe, he pays him, and of course begs for his life. Faulkner goes into his little thing where he's like, I had this speech written. It was really good, actually. It was all about dead friends and honor and all this shit. But now that I'm right here in front of you, I just don't want to get into all that. So, no, I'm not going to let you live. This is where you die. He ends him, takes his money, and goes out to the car, and him and Sean drive away. The last scene of the movie is Faulkner goes to Emil's school and walks up to him and says, let's talk about your dad.
Yeah. That kid is in for a screwed up life.
Yeah, that kid's going to be a ward of the state in about 5 years.
Yeah. Come on, let's go get some scotch. If you ever had scotch, you'll love it.
Let me introduce you to an old friend of mine named J&B.
Father says you're quite a good model maker. Do you want to make models of enemy encampments? That could be a good job for you.
Here, Emil, come on. Let's get some cutty sock and plan a raid in Africa. Yeah. So that is the Wild Geese. Boatload of stuff to talk about for that movie. It's
oh hell yeah.
It's a very dense dish.
Just how it ends up. I know there was a sequel, but I don't remember it having anything to do with Richard Burton and the kid, because that would just be too good of a thing to find out where the thing ended up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to see a buddy movie with those two, like going on adventures. That kid having to wipe his ass because he's passed out and shit himself.
Uh-huh.
That kid is the official puke cleaner-upper for Colonel Faulkner now.
After about a year, Faulkner would have pissed all of the money away. And you're right, the kid would be a ward of the state. But he'd have picked up some skills from Faulkner to escape, and he does end up on the streets with no money, so he ends up in another one of Faulkner's overseas adventures.
The Wild Geese 2 it's actually available on streaming somewhere. I think it's Paramount or one of those channels. And right after I finished my last watch through of Wild Geese for this podcast, I started watching Wild Geese 2. The first 5+ minutes of that movie is recaps from the Wild Geese.
Really?
Yeah, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with the sequel.
Yeah, they kind of did the same thing with Force 10 from Navarone. They wanted to really link it with its predecessor, even though it has almost nothing to do with the sequel.
Yeah, it's the
Just
same
character,
Colonel Mallory, but they had Robert Shaw play him.
Yeah,
instead of Gregory Peck. And in the Wild Geese, it was supposed to be Richard Burton. He was supposed to reprise his role as Faulkner. He died before filming. So they dedicated the movie to him, and they got Edward Fox to replace him. But Edward Fox doesn't play him. He plays Alex Faulkner, his brother. And that is the only connection to the Wild Geese.
Well, here's something weirder. Richard Harris was in the original Guns of Navarone as a character named Bixby or Bartlesby, and he's in it for like 2 minutes. But Harrison Ford plays him in the sequel, but as an American,
Oh,
even
that's
though
right.
Richard Harris was an English pilot or in the Navy, but they just wanted to continue that name for some reason. I don't know. It's
Weird.
the oddest thing.
All right. Well, that brings us to the section of the podcast that I like to call bullet points.
Yay!
Yay! And it's basically 5 talking points, and sometimes it's cliches, sometimes it's tropes, sometimes it's just things that I notice in movies. Bullet point number 1 is the namesake of my podcast, Endless Bullets. This movie is the poster child for a movie having endless amount of bullets in it. Just an endless amount. There are a couple scenes. I mean, I think Whitty running out of bullets is the only time it happens.
Yeah, and of course there's an endless supply of enemies running at you, and they've got bullets. But pretty much, and it's weird because they're carrying Uzis, and those fire so fast they would go through stick magazines like crazy.
Oh yeah, and they were shooting full auto.
Uh-huh.
There was no fire discipline whatsoever with those guys. It's like, oh, there's a guy, unload, full auto.
Yeah, unless they were each carrying about 15 clips, they would have been out by the time they got to the bridge.
Oh yeah, they would have had to have, I mean, just backpacks full of magazines.
Although I do feel they saved some ammo by doing the cyanide gas. That bought them some time.
It really did.
It really thinking did. Ahead.
Well, and they were shooting. There's a lot of different weaponry in this movie. They were using FN FAL rifles, but they were shooting them full auto, and you would go through a magazine real quick.
Yep. Yeah. Plus, they had the Vickers. That was a couple of guys to lug that thing around.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a World War I, or that's pre-World War II?
I think so.
Yeah, that's a very old school machine gun. Bullet point number 2: the suicide mission.
Yes, I think in a way, Richard Burton's character, I think, kind of would have preferred that he died. I think in a way it was kind of his suicide mission, and that he wanted to go out with his friends. He was in a box of self-hatred and self-destruction. I think that is a good explainer for a lot of his behavior. And also, look at the end, he had the hollowest dead eyes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like a big part of him died in Africa. I subscribe to that. I mean, I can't say that that's wrong, because he was definitely a man on a mission, even besides this mission. Like he was, it was almost like he was out to prove something.
Yeah.
And maybe it was his failure with getting Limbani a few years before, and this was like him finishing that job. Maybe that was like the one thing that kind of gnawed at him. I don't know. It's a fascinating one. I feel like this wasn't a suicide mission from the beginning. I feel like this mission was a cakewalk until they got double-crossed.
Yeah.
And that's when it became a suicide mission.
Although, one thing I like, from the point that they're double-crossed, you can kind of tell that Burton, one of the things he wants to do is kill Matheson.
Oh, he has a great line when he says to Rafer, when they're talking about like their options, he's like, Jonders says, "Oh, I'd very much like to meet this Matheson." He says to him real fast, he said, "Rafer, my friend, one day you will."
We'll do that later.
Yeah. It's like, oh, don't worry, buddy. We're going to fucking meet him. And I love how sinister he is right then, where he's just like, oh, yeah, we're going to fuck that guy up.
Yeah, I think he was a pretty good soldier. I mean, he played the part pretty well, and I got the feeling that you'd heard the stories about how one of the original ideas for casting John McClane in Die Hard was going to be Frank Sinatra. And for the longest time, that just puzzled me. But looking at Burton in his beret and his jungle camos, I can see some producer going, yeah, maybe that's what they had in mind. That type of, he's over the hill, yes, but he's got the look in his eye that like of a killer.
Yeah. Well, that's something I really love about this movie. And even when I saw it as a kid, I was so used to Schwarzenegger movies and Stallone movies and these like big ripped young dudes like running around being superhuman. And I love that all of these guys are older and a lot of them are over the hill, and they're way past their primes, and they're still out there like getting it done.
Yeah,
and
they're getting into machete fights with dudes.
Yeah, and they're not, and none of them are perfect, and they're guys that just want to keep doing the job that they're good at. And really just keep doing the job that they know how to do. And I just love that. I've always had a soft spot for old dogs that are still getting it done. That's why Star Trek 2 will always be my favorite Star Trek movie, is because it's like these guys are past their prime, but they're still out there kicking ass. It's a nice segue into bullet point number 3. I'm getting too old for this shit.
There's actually a line that's right on point for that, where Hera says, "I'm getting too old, and by the way, so are you."
And what Sandy says also feeds into that, where he's like, "I'm not too old." So it's definitely a recurring theme in this movie that these guys are too old for this shit, but they're still out there pulling it off.
Well, also there was the aspect of it's a young man's job, but also they're running away from responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
They're getting so old that they now have responsibilities, but they don't want to face those. Like, Sandy's got his wife, Whitty's got his job that he hates, that he doesn't want to do, but Faulkner's giving them the shiny object. Oh, you don't have to grow up. You can do this young man's adventure.
Yeah, you can be the Lost Boys to my Peter Pan, and you never have to grow up. You can stay young and do the young man job the rest of your life. And honestly, I mean, for some people, they would rather die than tend to rose bushes and wipe cream on guys' asses in a hospital or be a plumber.
Yeah.
And and that's why a lot of soldiers go through the PTSD, and a lot of the issues that they have is that they're struggling to settle up with that. And I feel like this movie doesn't get too deep into the weeds with it, but
what was the movie that Kirk Douglas and what was it, Robert Mitchum?
Burt Lancaster, Tough Guys.
Burt Okay, yeah. I feel like that was the movie that I saw as a kid that had this theme before I recognized it in this movie, seeing it much later.
Yeah, we're gonna go out doing what we do. Bullet point number 4 is the evil benefactor / double cross.
Ooh. Well, if you can't trust a banker who can equip you with cyanide gas, who can you trust?
Well, and maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm jaded. From the very first minute that you meet Sir Edward, and he's fucking knighted.
Yeah.
He's a sir. You just know he's a slime ball. Like, you can see that double cross coming a mile away.
And also you get the feeling that what he got his knighthood for was obtained in a smarmy way. Like there was a sex tape somewhere on one of the royals, and he found a way to buy it out. But he also probably leveraged that. They were going to give him a ribbon for protecting the queen's sister, but he said, "Well, now that I have the tape, I want to be a knight." Something like that in his background. This guy has lived, and it took Richard Burton to finally take him down, but oh my God, this guy has got a whole history of bad shit in his background.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, who could have played this part if it weren't for Stuart Granger would be Christopher Lee.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Stuart Granger had almost like a Saruman quality to him.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like in Lord of the Rings, when you first meet Saruman, you're just like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
Bullet point number 5 is the heart-wrenching ending.
Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't see Rafer's death coming. I feel like the whole movie was designed to deliver us to that point in time, but at the same time, I think it's still not as bad as the fact that the son ends up with this awful, awful person as his godfather now.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest tragedy of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, anytime a character tells another character, you're not going to die, they're going to die. And Faulkner flat out says to him when they're talking on that walk in the desert, and it's like, oh yeah, he's totally going to fucking die. Yeah, so they definitely foreshadow it. It's still a really sad death, and it's not just that he dies in combat, it's the situation and the fact that Faulkner has to shoot him and has to put him down, and that would fuck anybody.
Well, also the fact that this movie does so much wrong, in my opinion, but that anguishing scene is still so effective. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like a movie that has committed this many mistakes delivering us to its main point. Why does that work so well when the movie has screwed up so much? But it does.
They still get the exact response that they want, even though they didn't really earn it.
Well, it's like a magician at the beginning of the show says I'm gonna do this, this, and this, and you don't believe him, and then that exact thing happens in spite of it. It shouldn't be possible.
Yeah. Even though you know it's a trick, you're still amazed.
Yeah.
There's a few different heart wrenching parts in this movie too.
Mm-hmm.
So when Whitty dies, when Sandy dies, Peter dies. I mean, you get to know these guys, and there's a fair amount of character building with them. So I feel like they kind of soften you up to that, so that when Rafer dies, like you see it coming. When he's the last one on the plane and he's running for it, you're like, oh shit, he's not gonna fucking make it. So I mean, you see it coming a mile away, and it still hits you right in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's part of the. I feel like what makes this movie kind of timeless is it still has an effect whenever I watch it. This is probably the 30th time I've seen this movie.
Yeah, it's almost like the movie itself is one of its characters. This movie is too old. You don't expect a movie that's based in like this kind of basic setups to be effective. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like the movie's over the hill, but it still works.
Well, and another thing, and I don't think we've touched on it about this movie, is that it has the feel of a World War II movie.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in a theater that you don't see a lot of action movies happen in. It's in Africa. Yeah. It's in a time period that you don't see a lot of war movies in, which is 1978. And it's really kind of a snapshot action movies in general in that time, in 1978.
When you first saw this movie, on what level did this work on you? Because I imagine like when its target audience saw it, just of like baby boomers, right, seeing it, and they just saw it as a regular, action, men on a mission movie like we've seen a dozen times, and they're not getting the kind of stuff that you and I are seeing it from a historical hindsight. You know what I mean?
Right.
You saw this probably when you were very young first, right?
I saw this, it would have been like 1984 or 85. So I would have been like 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
And I mean, I was pretty advanced for an 8-year-old at that point. But I mean, 8-year-olds now don't even know what planet they're on. But so I was watching stuff like The Terminator and this. And I mean, you couldn't throw a movie at me that would shock me. But I remember seeing this one and feeling like it was a really old movie, even though it was 6, 7 years old at that point.
Yeah, Burton definitely connects it to the past. Him and Granger also. But what made you decide to pick this one?
I don't know. I've always liked this one.
I mean, it's great. I'm glad you did.
I hadn't done a war movie yet, and I wanted to kind of just do something that was kind of off the beaten path a little bit. And I feel like this one doesn't get a ton of attention. And I know we had talked about doing Con Air, but that one is, millennials have kind of muckled onto that because of Nick Cage's kind of current comedy, and the fact that
he's having a third career
joke.
renaissance.
Well, he's kind of, he's like that guy that you joke about, and millennials have kind of claimed him as like, oh yeah, Nick Cage, he's crazy. And when you look at Con Air, it's kind of this. Imagine Nick Cage as a hillbilly in an action movie, and it's kind of a cartoon, and I do want to do Con Air, but I feel like it's so well known that I wanted to kind of do another one that doesn't get a lot of shine.
Oh, I understand completely, but yeah, I'm definitely down for it.
Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thanks very much for having me on your podcast. I enjoyed the hell out of this.
Oh, for sure, man. And it's always a pleasure. I enjoy your company. Tell the audience where they can find some of your work.
My comic Vector is available for order or for digital download on Indie Planet. And if you go to any of the Art of Disney galleries, either in the Disney parks or at Disney Springs in Central Florida, I've got work in there. Exciting new stuff in the work.
Once again, I know you said you've worked for Marvel, for DC, for Dark Horse. What are some of the titles that you've worked on in the past that maybe people could go and find back issues?
Primarily for Dark Horse, I did Star Wars stuff, a series called X-Wing Rogue Squadron. You know, it's funny. They a couple of years ago they planned on making a movie about that one, but it got killed because of creative differences with the director Patty Jenkins, and so that one, I guess, it got canceled. Also, I've done Boba Fett and Aliens. Colonial Marines for Dark Horse, and for Marvel I did an issue of Wolverine, and for DC I did an issue of Green Lantern Annual.
And you did one of my favorite covers of all time, which was Boba Fett Twin Engines of Destruction.
Oh, that was a fun one to work on. I remember when I was in my 20s working on that, I had to sell that to make ends meet, and I wish I had tried harder to keep hold of it.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. You did the interiors on that one too, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's a great issue. I've still got that framed signed one you gave me. Well, all right, man. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for tagging along with us on this ride. We will catch you next time. Lock and load.